Good evening, America. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the latest edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and the wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. Folks, this is a great coffee. I love it. Go check it out. It's the official coffee of Just the News. If you go to wired2fishcoffee.com and use the promo code Just News, you get 10% off everything in the store, including their inflation-busting 2-pound bags, which are a great deal, under $20 if you use that promo code. Everybody will like that. All right, just a few moments ago, just happened. We're on top of it right now. The astronauts who were trapped in space for 9 months splashed down safely in the water. Yes, a rescue mission that Elon Musk helped pull off with NASA, making a big difference today. And, well, hey, that is breaking news that you just got. It literally just happened 30 seconds before we got on here. All right. Meanwhile, President Trump is making more headway in his administration's effort to end the war in Ukraine today. He spent nearly 3 hours on the phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And when the call ended, Trump and Putin had agreed to seek a limited ceasefire in Ukraine focused on ending attacks on energy and maritime infrastructure in that war. Now, while there's a lot more work to be done before any deal is reached, one thing is clear. Less than 60 days into his presidency, Donald Trump has already made more progress on peace in the Russia-Ukraine war than his predecessor did during the past few years since the war started. Meanwhile, the controversy over federal judge James Boasberg's order escalated today. As you know, that's the judge who ruled that President Trump could not deport illegal alien gang members, violent gang members. Congressman Brandon Gill of Texas just introduced impeachment articles against the Democrat-appointed judge, saying Boasberg abused his judicial power by ruling that the president could not get rid of, quote, violent and demented criminals, many of them deranged murderers. How about that? Meanwhile, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts unexpectedly weighed into the dispute as well, saying he doesn't believe impeachment is the right solution when political leaders disagree with rulings. Well, we'll get more on that over the next few weeks. We'll see how the appeals process plays out. Finally, the 2 IRS agents who blew the whistle on Hunter Biden and then suffered retaliation got a piece of good news today from President Trump. In fact, both were promoted to special advisors to the Treasury Secretary. Agents Gary Shapley and Joe Ziegler, who you saw on this show, they came on several times, suffered much retaliation after they did the right thing, and many are happy to see that they finally have gotten rewarded for following the law. All right, it's a great time to bring in my amazing host, Amanda Head, for more headlines. Amanda, what are you watching?
Yeah, I believe last time we had them on, we brought up the notion that maybe they would have some type of advisory role in this administration.
How about that? It happened. Yeah.
All right, I want to open again tonight with some more media malpractice. And before I get into it, let me just show you this clip from the opening of CBS Evening News last night and tell me if you can spot what is wrong with it.
On this St. Patrick's Day, as millions of Americans celebrate their Irish heritage, recent events remind us that the Irish were among the first immigrants to be targeted in deportation crackdowns.
In the mid-1800s, New York and Massachusetts enforced policies to have Irish immigrants rounded up and deported.
The American Civil Liberties Union didn't exist then, but if it had, it may have taken the legal position it is taking now, suing the Trump administration to stop what it considers to be the illegal deportation over the weekend of more than 200 migrants to El Salvador.
I think that equating what is happening with Venezuelan gang members illegally entering the United States and then being deported, it's not the same thing as Irish immigrants, what they faced when they first came to America. I don't think that that comparison works at all. In fact, it borders on journalistic malpractice, and I don't mean to send you all to journalism school, as I have not been there myself, but I think that that's pretty much a general rule. And I'm shocked that the media is still attempting to do this because, as we have said on this program, and many of our guests have asserted this narrative really is not working anymore with the American public. Deporting illegal aliens is not about race. It is about the safety of America and actually enforcing our laws already on the books. And frankly, I don't think that doubling down on defending Venezuelan gang members is going to go over too well with the American people. This is another one of those 60-40, 70-30 type issues. But John, I think our next guest is going to have something to say about that.
Yeah, one other thing about the media, they're having another bad week. The Associated Press had to retract their story, retract the false statement in their story, saying that Tulsi Gabbard had claimed that President Trump and President Putin were good friends. That's not what he said. He actually said it was President Modi of India, a little bit different than Putin. Big walk back on that for the Associated Press, which of course has had its struggles with the Trump White House over the last few weeks. Indeed. All right, we're very lucky. Last night we broke the story about these new investigations into possible security failures again at the Capitol, possible weapons coming into the Capitol around the time that President Trump was speaking both on January 20th and on March 4th. The man who gave us that warning a year ago that maybe the Capitol isn't as secure as it needs to be, he's joining us right now. He's currently the chairman of the special January 6th committee on the House Judiciary Committee, and he's a congressman from the great state of Georgia, our good friend, Barry Loudermilk. Mr. Chairman, good to have you back on the show.
It's always good to be with you both, and it's been a little while, but I'm glad to be back.
We are glad to have you. Every time you come on, we always learn a lot of new things. Now, I know even though you're on judiciary and you've left the administration, you keep an eye on Capitol security. It's very close to your heart. I know you've probably known something about these two security episodes that are being investigated. What do you think about them? What do you know about them?
As you have said, all along through our investigation into what happened on January 6th, the one key element was what was the security breakdown, what led to the security failure at the Capitol, regardless of who did it and how violent they were. They should have never been able to breach the Capitol. And the Select Committee on January 6th, they didn't even look into it. So that's one of the areas that we focused a lot of our attention on, which not only include Capitol Police, but you look at the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, who knew what and when. But in all of that, we saw that there were no significant changes made within the U.S. Capitol Police after January 6th, that showed me that they were serious about changing their security posture. There was a lot of covering up. There was a lot of, scapegoating going on. And so even within the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've made the statement, we need to continue probing deeply into the U.S. Capitol Police and into the leadership, because there's a big lack of oversight right now with them. Look, the Inspector General is not as independent as people think they are, because this is one of the few Inspector Generals that has no oversight, and they're hired and fired by the people that they're actually overseeing. And there's no whistleblower protection for Capitol Police officers. And in fact, these latest incidents were brought to my attention by a few of the Capitol Police officers who, really requested anonymity because they know that they have no protections, but they thought at least I, being the one who's led most of the probe into the Capitol Police and the security failures there, that I ought to know what is still happening. And I think this is showing there's been no significant improvement. In fact, maybe even a degradation, that somebody armed could get into the Capitol during these important incidents when the president himself is in the building.
Goodness.
Wow, that is something. So let me just follow up on the January 20th episode, which is a long time ago. We're just starting to get some sense of what happened. Can you tell us what the officers told you about what happened that day, whether someone walked around a magnetometer or something?
Well, there was a couple of things that was brought to my attention, and we're still trying to find out, how much there is to it. And of course, without the committee that I previously had, not engaged, I've lost the ability to do some of the probing. But what I was told is that there was someone who was escorted around a magnetometer who turned out to have a firearm with them. Now, I've had some tell me that it was not verified, but that person may have been in the area that President Trump was in on January 20th. I mean, within the same room. And so that's highly concerning. One, that someone would be armed. Two, that they may have been escorted around a magnetometer.
Yeah, important.
It's terrifying to think. And as far as we know right now, with both of these instances, doesn't seem like it was malintent with respect to committing harm against the President of the United States, but you never know when that could possibly happen. Was there a breakdown in communication between security at the Capitol and Secret Service? Because I would think that with layers of protection and redundancy, at least Secret Service would have picked up on this at the time.
Secret Service knew. They rely heavily on the security of the U.S. Capitol Police in an instance like this, where the inauguration was inside, and then we had the State of the Union address, both being in the Capitol. So the Secret Service, yes, they're there and they're engaged. They're sweeping the building. But when it comes to the personal security, who's getting in, who doesn't, that's really left up to the U.S. Capitol Police. And so they rely heavily on the Capitol Police in these instances. And, Capitol Police have some level of authority. I mean, they can identify someone to go around the magnetometers. Obviously, we do because we're wearing congressional pins. Members of Congress can get around there. But our staff can't. They're not authorized to go around the magnetometers, and I think it's very limited of who they're going to allow to go around there. Obviously, Capitol Police officers are, but I think the probe needs to look in who this person was and who allowed them to get in armed, because what I understand is there was somebody either within Capitol Police with somebody with a level of authority that could authorize it.
Wow, that's important. So you not only reminded us that maybe the Capitol wasn't as secure as it be, but your final report also pointed out that there were some communication gaps between the Secret Service and the Capitol Police in earlier episodes. One of those, the January 6th day when the pipe bombs were discovered. You continue to follow this and dig on this. You're not taking no for an answer. I understand the FBI may have turned over some documents recently to the Judiciary Committee. Do you know anything about that? Where are we on getting any closer to what happened with those pipe bombs?
We're getting more information. Yes, the Department of Justice is cooperating, which is a great thing. But there's still certain hoops you have to go through, right? Yeah. There is a separation of powers, and so to get information, at least when Chairman Jordan and I send a letter over to the Department of Justice, they at least answer it and say, okay, if you want these documents, you have to specify this, or we may need a subpoena for it. So they're working with us. They're staying within the boundaries of the law and separation of powers, and so that's encouraging. But there is a lot of information that we need to derive out of the information they give us. And I keep going back to the report that the FBI IG sent out about confidential human resources right near the end of last year, where they identified that they had several, I think over 30 confidential human resources embedded in the crowds there on January 6th, and even some of the extremist groups that were there. And my question is, and this is where I want some follow-up, is not only who these informants were, but more importantly, what intelligence did the FBI gain from these embedded agents? Did they know that this was coming? And if not, why not? But I can assume that they got some valuable intelligence. And what did the FBI do with that intelligence? Did they inform the Capitol Police? Did they inform Secret Service? What did they do with that intelligence? And so this kind of goes back into that communications area, but also, as we saw in our investigation, there were massive failures in several agencies. But then there was this huge cover-up by most of them to try to cover themselves.
Yeah, it took your relentless work to get that information out. Really important.
Yeah, and I think Director Patel and Deputy Director Bongino are going to have a lot of questions and uncovering to do when it comes to those confidential human sources. I want to stay on the January 6th conversation for a moment. President Trump trying to revoke and basically nullify a lot of these pardons that were signed by President Biden, or maybe signed by a machine by President Biden. Depending on what happens with that, because President Trump will probably send it all the way up to the flagpole to the Supreme Court. But what do you anticipate should or could happen for these folks that are no longer pardoned, at least?
It's interesting that, first of all, that just blanket pardons were handed out, which to me is an admission of some level of guilt. And I've advocated, as you know, in our last report, I did not claim anybody committed a crime, but I did say there's enough evidence that there should be investigated by some of the members, and one in particular, Liz Cheney, on the select committee, because of her back channel communications with Cassidy Hutchinson without her attorney present. And so we made a recommendation for the Department of Justice should look into this. And obviously, with a blanket pardon, they could still look into it, but she couldn't be held accountable. My interest, though, was if they are going to be pre-pardoned, I would really be interested in talking to the other members and staff members of the Select Committee. Because we're still looking for a significant number of documents and videos that have seemed to disappear, and somebody knows what happened to them and where they are. But if those pre-pardons are reversed by the Supreme Court, then that really opens it one way opens the door and another way it closes. I mean, right now with the pardon, I don't think anyone can plead the Fifth Amendment, right? But they could still be held in contempt of Congress. So that kind of opens the door for getting information. But if we'll see what plays out with this, and we'll adjust our strategy going forward if we're given the authority like we had before to pursue the Select Committee on January 6th and the investigation, which I think is extremely important to do. Then that we'll set a strategy going forward then.
Yeah, And one thing we know of, when you set your mind to something, you stay on it. The work you did, peeling layers and layers of obfuscation away so we could get the truth, at least some of the truth about January 6th, is really to be commended. And I have a funny feeling under Chairman Jordan, you're going to get a lot more done. Sir, great to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate all the great work you do.
Yeah, back at you, sir. Thanks so much. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to stay in Congress for a second. Congressman Gabe Evans from Colorado is going to join us. We're going to discuss those sanctuary state and city policies and some of that insanity we're seeing in the courts right now. We'll tackle that right after these messages. Hey, it's a new day in America and a new administration in Washington, D.C. There is a lot of excitement and optimism about the future, but the reality is there's a lot of work to do as well, especially when it comes to fixing our broken healthcare system. The truth is that the forces that are responsible for breaking our healthcare system aren't going to simply go away. The challenges our system faces won't disappear overnight. Now more than ever, you need to be prepared. That's where the Wellness Company comes in. Their doctors are medical professionals that you can trust, and their line of prescription medical kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy, as well as your family. Whether it's the medical emergency kit, the contagion kit, the first aid kit, or the travel kit, these prescription kits contain an assortment of life-saving medications and guidebooks to assist in the proper use of these medications. From the flu to strep throat, from COVID to the bird flu, from a trip to the beach to a trip overseas, the Wellness Company has a prescription kit designed to keep you and your family safe. Make America healthy again. Start at home. Do your part and protect the health of you and your family. Go to twc.health/justnews today and order. That's twc.health/justnews and use the promo code JUSTNEWS to save 10% off.
Welcome back, everybody. We've seen quite a bit in the media about President Trump's immigration policies, and they aren't too terribly pleased about it, and they are publishing negative stories every chance they get. The only problem is I'm not totally sure that the public is taking the bait this time around. But what about in more left-leaning states that have sanctuary city policies? How are those people out there feeling? With us to give us his perspective on that and much more is Colorado Congressman Gabe Evans. Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Sir, you have served the people of Colorado and this country in many different capacities as law enforcement in our armed services, State House too, I believe, and now in our nation's house. I want to ask you, though, back at home, people in blue cities, places like Denver, Colorado, Aurora, which of course had the infamous Tren de Aragua incident taking place at the apartment building there. Are Democrats becoming a little bit more sympathetic to the notion that maybe our borders should be closed, at least to violent criminals?
Well, I think you've got two categories of Democrats there. You have the ruling Democrats that are in power right now, who unfortunately continue to double down on just their far left failed agenda. And then you have the rank and file folks in Colorado who just want to be able to live their lives, have a business, have a family, have their best version of the American dream. And unfortunately, when you have cities like Denver, Colorado, which has double the homicide rate of San Francisco right now, unfortunately, that dream can't be reached by a lot of these folks. And so being able to have a robust enforcement policy to get violent international gangs out of our community is a very common sense first step in being able to get back to that safe, affordable community that so many rank and file voters want.
Oh, looks like we might have lost the congressman there for a second. Let's see if we can try to get him back in the control room. The congressman recently introduced the Uplift Act, which I'm really excited about. We'll get to ask him about that hopefully in a second, trying to undo his own state sanctuary policy using federal policy. Congressman, you still with us? Did we get you back? There you are.
I got you. How about me?
Yeah, it looks like he's still freezing. All right, we're going to try to fix that and get to him. It's amazing that the federal government has to go in and try to correct the problem that a state and a city creates for itself. But Denver's ground zero of this, Aurora's ground zero of this, and the notion that this is going to keep on and the American people are going to tolerate it. the polls and the election told us otherwise. We're done with this. Yeah. It's fascinating that these cities are doubling down.
Well, and they find these passion stories, like an actress in LA who was in one of the reboots of American Pie, who so sadly and devastatingly and terrifyingly was, I think she was held for 12 or 13 days. Well, right. As it turns out, she had not renewed her visa cycle after cycle after cycle, had a business in Los Angeles that you know, obviously when you have immigration issues, anything you are tied to there then becomes an issue. So I think the American people are wising up to it this time.
Yeah, no, and I can't imagine too, if you were one of those people that went through the horror in Aurora and now you see a federal judge say, you can't get rid of those people, they keep them in the country so they can hire more Americans, you got to be going just nuts about that. Congressman, I think we've got you back now, and that's good because we got a lot of questions for you. You are taking this issue on directly, the sanctuary city issue in your own state. Talk us about one of your first pieces of legislation you've introduced, the Uplift Act.
Yeah, the Uplift Act, unhandcuffing police to locate and interdict foreign transgressors. It does a lot of things, but it takes direct aim at those sanctuary state policies by, among other things, extending hold harmless protections to state and local law enforcement officers if they decide to work with the federal authorities to get violent criminals out of our communities, even if that coordination is prohibited by state and local law, which it is in places like Colorado.
I want to ask you about the relationship with law enforcement. You obviously have a deep love as someone who served in blue. It endangers law enforcement on the ground when you have a state like Colorado, a governor like Jared Polis, who you've got this push and pull of responsibilities and desires as far as that community to lock them up. It endangers law enforcement, doesn't it?
It absolutely endangers law enforcement. I mean, we're talking the Sinaloa cartel, we're talking the Jalisco cartel, we're talking Tren de Aragua, and at times these people have guns to where they're potentially outgunning law enforcement officers. You can go look at some of the information surrounding the takeover of some of the apartment complexes in Aurora, where rank and file patrol officers, through no fault of their own, were uncomfortable responding to those places from an officer safety perspective, unless they actually had armored vehicles with them. And so these sanctuary policies really provide sanctuary only for criminals and violent gangs and cartels that are committing crimes and dealing poison like fentanyl in our communities. And in Colorado, it is the people who pay the price. Colorado is number 2 in the nation for teenagers overdosing and dying on fentanyl, which again, in my area, is predominantly trafficked by the Jalisco and the Sinaloa cartels.
That's so tragic and so unnecessary. Sir, you're a law and order guy. When you see a federal judge tell the President of the United States he can't remove illegal alien gang members who pose an imminent danger to Americans from the country, he can't do it to protect Americans, what runs through your mind and how do you think the courts will ultimately resolve this?
Oh, I mean, I think we've already seen what's going to happen there. The Trump administration has appealed that because it makes no sense. We have to be able to get violent criminals out of our communities when they're committing crimes. And we've seen the direct impact of that in districts like mine. Again, Tren de Aragua. They had, it was being referred to as the nightclub, basically their hangout, not an actual nightclub, just their hangout spot, actually in my district. And we saw a major raid that was coordinated by several different federal law enforcement agencies take almost 50 of these members into custody and then immediately turn around and deport them, because getting these folks out of our community is the best and the fastest way to be able to protect public safety and make sure that we actually have safe places for our families. And so that, unfortunately, was not happening under the previous administration. It's not happening under the sanctuary state policies. And so we desperately needed a new administration to come in and within a couple of weeks round up dozens of these known violent foreign criminals and gangbangers.
Yeah, so important.
Sir, before we let you go, I got to ask you about the money and the budgeting side of things. Republicans pretty smoothly got through the CR process, including in the Senate, which I think was maybe a little bit of a surprise towards the end of things. But now the real work begins. And Republicans certainly seem to be more unified now than they were even in the 118th or 117th Congress. How unified, though? I feel like this is when the pedal hits the pavement. This is when we are going to find out just how unified you are.
Well, they say in sports, success breeds success, and we've already had three big successes where the pundits said we couldn't do it. They said we wouldn't get a Speaker of the House in the first vote, we did. They said we wouldn't pass a reconciliation resolution out of the House, we did. And they said we wouldn't be able to pass a continuing resolution, which actually helps to reverse the trend by lowering government spending while fully funding all of the critical functions of government that we need. We were able to pass that out of the House. And so, again, I think that we are unified, and I'm very confident that going forward, we're going to be able to address a lot of these different issues and be able to continue on the good work that the administration is doing.
Yeah, I keep calling it the Patti LaBelle Congress. There's a new attitude on Capitol Hill, and it's really, really nice to see. Congressman Gabe Evans from Colorado, thank you so much for being here.
Good to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, coming up, we are still waiting on the JFK files to be released. We're going to have more on that next.
Hey folks, did you know scammers can literally steal your home right out from under you? The FBI calls it house stealing, and it's a growing real estate scam targeting American homeowners. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee, and file it with your local recorder's office. And just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. Then they can take out loans using your equity as collateral or even sell the property behind your back, and you won't even know it's happening until you start getting collections or foreclosure notices months later. So let me ask you, when was the last time you checked your home title lock? If you're like me, the answer is never. And that's exactly what scammers are counting on. That's why I trust Home Title Lock. Their $1 million triple lock protection helps keep your homes and equity safe. Here's what you get. Immediate 24/7 monitoring of your property, urgent alerts if there are any changes, and if fraud should ever happen, their U.S.-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title at no additional cost to you. And here's the best part. I've teamed up with Home Title Lock to give you a free title history report so you can find out if you're already a victim and access to your personal title expert. A $250 value just for signing up. So do this. Go to HometitleLock.com and use my promo code JTN250. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN250 to get the protection and peace of mind you deserve. All right, folks, you're looking at live footage right now, live from Real America's Voice. The astronauts soon to get out of the capsule that just splashed down in the ocean. 9 months in space. If it weren't for Elon Musk and Donald Trump, they might still be there, because Lord knows the Biden administration didn't have a good plan for him. But NASA and Elon Musk are making an incredible success story. A safe splashdown. Right now, you're looking at the capsule. We're going to keep that down in a right-hand box so you can continue to watch that through the rest of the show as these astronauts finally get their feet back on Earth after, well, pretty long time up in space. All right, we want to also turn to the other big story of the day, and that is that we believe before midnight tonight, hopefully, that the Justice Department and National Archives will release the last of the JFK assassination documents that are in the government's possession. Now, we've had this expert on before. I think he's the best. He knows more about what's in and what's not in the documents than anyone I know. He's an attorney, and he's done so much in the JFK assassination records case to get us to this point. He is Larry Schnapp. Larry, good to have you back on the show, sir.
Hi, thank you.
All right, we could be just a few minutes or hours away from a long-awaited release. What's your expectation? Will we be disappointed? Will we be enthralled? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I get it's another case of President Trump. He's on his skis, ready to go down the slope, and the bureaucrats are still putting their ski boots on. He wanted to release the records this morning, and apparently last night, the Department of Justice, National Security lawyers were told to start reviewing the records. So we're very excited. There's 80,000 records, pages supposedly being dumped, and also roughly 15,000 FBI records we've never seen before. So we're very excited about the possibility. A little concerned that, the Department of Justice lawyers are looking at this. We don't know what criteria they're using, but I guess we'll deal with that when the time comes. There are a couple things I'm looking for. The first I'm looking for is the FBI files, obviously, because we've never seen them before. And most of the FBI files that are in the collection right now pertain to the mafia. Names withheld and that sort of stuff. So That's what I'm going to look at first. And then what we really want to know is there are records that the government possesses that were not in the JFK collection. In other words, not in the collection that the National Archives has control over. And I sent a letter to the White House counsel in February advising him of these records that are not in the collection. And we're hoping that whatever gets released, it includes these kinds of records. And they include Joe Needy's files, who was a liaison for the CIA with the Cuban exile group in New Orleans. There was also Donald Heath memo that he was the CIA person tasked over the weekend of the assassination to go down to Miami and determine if there's any Cubans involved in the assassination. He referred to records that no one has seen. We have David Atlee Phillips, who was head of misinformation for the CIA. His records are withheld. There's some stuff at Angleton, and there's some testimony before the House, the Church Committee that has not been released. And there's allegedly a tape that was sealed since the mid-'80s of Carlos Marcello in jail, allegedly confessing to being behind the assassination. So we're kind of looking for those things. There's not going to be a smoking gun. No one's going to be dumb enough to put something in writing and say, here's how we're going to kill the president. But just like the CIA has postponed the records because they're afraid that somehow a mosaic could be created by our adversaries about our methods and procedures. Those of us on the JFK research side are also hoping that whatever comes out is going to give us a mosaic, more information that historians can put together about circumstances surrounding the assassination. So we're not going to see anyone saying here's who's going to kill the president, but we're going to learn about leads they pursued, people they didn't talk to or they talked to and chose not to, associations Oswald may have had with people in New Orleans and elsewhere. So, it's going to be stuff and it's probably going to take months to kind of get to the bottom of this. I mean, we've organized a group, and each one of us is going to be looking at different areas, and we've actually creating an AI search engine to try to enhance our ability to search the records.
Wow.
Larry, I have what some would probably consider a pipe dream, but that is ultimate transparency of the government. What do you think it would ever take for us to get all of the information, including what is under the redaction? Does it take everybody in all of these documents, primary, secondary, tertiary connections, to all be dead? What does it take?
Well, that is the standard that the CIA and the FBI have been using, and that's not what the statute says. And that's why we sued President Biden 2 years ago, because they were not releasing names of people that might have either witnesses or information about the assassination until they died. They used a 100-year rule. They would take 100 years from the person's date of birth. And that prevents us from interviewing these people. So when President Trump came into power in 2017, the National Security Council was tasked with, reviewing the records. And there were still a lot of deep state people working in that department, that group. When President Trump came in this time, he fired 150 people. So we're hoping that the people that were interested in hiding things are gone. And now the people that are in there are going to want to please the president and release all this information. Look, there might be a handful of documents that somehow might actually have an impact or have a threat to national security. I can't imagine how, but there might be a handful. And maybe that can be redacted. I don't think anyone wants to jeopardize national security. But for the most part, these national security arguments are just, they're not meritorious. I mean, I think I told you last time there was one document that got released in 2019, and the information in there we had known forever. The reason they had not released it was because the information had been gathered by our listening station in Australia. And we had promised the Australian government in the 1960s we would never let anyone know we had a listening station on their soil. Meanwhile, the CIA keeps postponing these records, while the most popular TV show in the 2010s in Australia is about our CIA listening station. We have a problem with overclassification in this country.
Larry, we're going to interrupt you here just for a second, because they've just opened the hatch of the capsule, and the astronauts who've been in space for 9 months are going to be back home on U.S. soil here on a ship in just a second. Let's see how this goes here. We're going to let everybody just watch for a second, then we'll come back and wrap things up with you, Larry. Hang on a second. All right, they're looking in there. They've got maybe some. Okay, we're going to pipe the audio so you can hear literally what's going on from NASA.
Remember, they're taking photos of the side hatch seal. This is part of the standard operation for recovery. These photos will get saved into our procedure. We'll then install that protective frame around the side hatch. This helps to ensure that the side hatch itself, the edges of it, incur no damage while crew members are coming out from the spacecraft. If you missed it, there was also a recovery team member that went inside. So there are now 5 people on board the Dragon spacecraft.
And if you are just joining us, it has not yet even been an hour since Crew 9 splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time. The crew is now on board the recovery vessel Megan, and the hatch is open. The next major milestone that we'll see is when the crew will actually egress or exit the spacecraft. But before that, they'll continue to, the recovery personnel rather, will continue to install that protective area around the hatch and then remove the footrests. So we're a couple minutes away from seeing the crew egress, but not too long away.
All right, folks, we're going to stay with this. We really want to see these astronauts come out and get back on the ground. First, Larry, I want to say thank you. All the work you've done over the years to get us to this moment. And whenever it happens, you have made a big role, played a big role in that. And I have a funny feeling, I've been hearing from my source, that Carlos Marcello could be a very big part of tomorrow's release. So thank you for all the work you've done on that. And I think we'll get you back on maybe as early as tomorrow to get through the good stuff.
Yeah.
80,000 pages. I'll be working hard. So
Okay, maybe we'll give you a day.
We might have to have you back on a couple days in a row. Yeah, we'll do that. But it's always a great honor, and the work you've done as a Freedom of Information Act lawyer to just get the American people the truth, it's greatly appreciated. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. All right, folks, in a couple seconds, we're going to bring on our next guest. We're going to blow through the break here because we want you to see the astronauts. Oh, we got a glimpse of them there.
That was great.
Look at that, a little bit of camera action there. There's 5 people in that little tiny capsule. Just think about that. Good thing you're not claustrophobic. It'd be pretty tough. We're going to watch this in a second, and then we're going to bring in our next guest, Josh Hammer. Amanda, I know he's got a great new book out that everybody's talking about. Also does great work at Newsweek, so that's going to be an exciting interview. But I think we're almost at that moment, folks. It looks like they took the picture of the astronauts. They look to be unbuckled, so I think they're probably ready to emerge here. I don't know if we can get sound back in control room, but might be fun to have a little bit of sound here.
Seats egress first, as it makes moving around inside the capsule a little bit easier. We can see the tablets that were previously located on the upper leg of the crew members. We can see those being handed out to the recovery team. Those were taken off prior to the entry phase, to spacecraft reentry. Those had to be stored and secured prior to dynamic operations.
It looks like we are starting to see the footrests also be removed. I just saw one there on the screen. There are 4, of course, 1 for each crew member.
Those footrests are made out of carbon fiber and are actually sized appropriately for each crew member, as everybody has different measurements and different leg lengths. Same goes for the armrests and the bucket length of each seat. We size those appropriately for the crew members and to ensure their comfort and safety. I believe we just saw the little ramp that is used to help slide the crew members out from inside the spacecraft.
And once the crew does exit Dragon Freedom, they will be placed on to a stretcher to go to a medical bay for medical checkouts. This is standard procedure for all Dragon spacecraft flights that splashdown crewed, as well as for our Soyuz spacecraft that land in Kazakhstan.
We could see the exterior of Dragon Freedom quite clearly in this shot, and it's such a beautiful sight. I personally prefer the capsule when it has some of that charring from atmospheric reentry. It is the signature sign of a capsule that has returned to Earth.
Continuing to stand by for our first crew member to egress or exit Crew Dragon Freedom following their splashdown at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time. Dragon undocked from the International Space Station at 10:05 p.m. Pacific just yesterday, so it was about 17 hours of phasing.
All right, everybody, we are going to have our producers keeping an eye on that, and we'll go straight to it when the astronauts start egressing. That was a new term that I learned today, but basically stepping out of the capsule. All right, I want to turn our attention to what's going on in Israel recently. Israeli forces announced earlier today that airstrikes on the Gaza Strip had eliminated the leader of Hamas, along with other key Hamas officials. And meanwhile, President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin both expressed their desire for stability in that region and for Iran to cease hostilities with Israel. So joining us now to discuss all of this and why the Trump administration's stance on Israel is so important, not only for our own country, but for the entire Western world, is the senior editor-at-large of Newsweek and author of the book Israel and Civilization, Josh Hammer. Josh, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Looking very forward to digging into your book and sharing that with our audience, but I just want to get your reaction on the airstrikes that took place last night, the news that major Hamas officials, including their leader, were taken out. What kind of an impact does this have on that war going forward?
Look, Hamas had every opportunity to continue this ceasefire. They turned down opportunity after opportunity. They continued to try to extract more concessions. You know, one might say that they were not exactly negotiating in good faith, which is what we would expect from a U.S. designated foreign terrorist organization, a medieval Islamist death cult trying to take us back to the 7th century. You know, frankly, it was only a matter of time before the IDF went back in, meaningfully speaking, back into Gaza, especially considering the fact that President Trump has all but told Benjamin Netanyahu to do so. I mean, Donald Trump has said Hamas will pay for hell. He has this very bold paradigm-shifting Gaza plan there. He's basically told, or all but told Bibi that you should send the IDF back in there. So it was really only a matter of time, I think, until Bibi Netanyahu actually did it there. The relevant question, frankly, is this actually going to be it? It's been almost a year and a half now since October 7, 2023. The IDF thus far has not truly finished the job. I mean, Hamas is seriously wounded, to be clear. They have taken massive hit after massive hit, including, as you noted, over the past 24 hours or so. But is this actually going to be the beginning of the end for Hamas? That's really the million-dollar question. I'm frankly not entirely sure what the answer is, but I sure hope so. Indeed, I actually pray so as well.
Yeah, Josh, before we dive into more questions, especially about your book, we're just going to pause on this screen for a moment because the astronauts are on Dragon Freedom are supposedly getting out. We are waiting for that to happen. John, I know it's always SOP that as soon as they come out because of zero-G and muscle atrophy and such, they have to immediately be on that stretcher. But I've always kind of wondered if there are some intrepid and
just wants to get off
a little
and walk
confident
off the
astronauts
ship.
that want to get up and just wobble across the ship.
Keep in mind, 9 months months has been a really extraordinary time to be under anti-gravity environment. And so these guys may have a little bit weaker than normal muscle tone. It's going to be interesting to see.
Well, none of them expected to be there that long.
No.
So, you think of all the preparation that astronauts have to go through before a trip.
And even on a normal, shorter one, it sometimes takes 2 or 3 days for the body to adjust, they say. So this could be a little bit longer, but really fascinating to see what is going on here. When you look at these capsules, when they take off, they're perfectly bright white. They're all painted. And when they come back and you see that little brown coloring on it, some of it is shadowing, but you also get to see just how hot the atmosphere is and how much scorching it does to the outer capsule. Of course, lots of protection on the inside, but something to really marvel at.
And even structural damage that can sometimes take place, because I don't think people necessarily realize how tough it is between those layers of the atmosphere.
Our first astronaut. There we go.
There we go.
Second.
Oh, it's the second
that's
one.
Right. Yeah, that's our second. Yeah, that's right. Look at that.
Well, they've got longer telomeres and younger mitochondria at this point.
Welcome home. Look at that. Good to have them home on safe ground. That's great. Great news for everyone. All right, let's get back to Josh. What do you say?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Right. Josh, this book is fantastic. And I think you said something just as we cut you off to get to the breaking news. And I know you're a journalist, you appreciate that. But I think Hamas is extraordinarily weak. And you said so. Is Israel's goal now just to fully eradicate them and never have to deal with them? Or is there a middle ground where they weaken them further and then say, all right, we're done. Let's just get back to governing Gaza?
Look, Israel very clearly announced 2 war aims at the beginning of this war, after October 7th. They said Hamas must be completely eradicated as a political and military institution in Gaza, and we want to retrieve all the hostages. Those are the 2 war aims. Thus far, they have not secured their war aims. And John, I'm afraid from Israel's perspective that unless and until they do so, it must be conceded that they will actually have lost the war on their own terms. So I'm not sure that they have a choice. They set a very clear goal after October 7th, and who can fault them after what happened on October 7th? So unless and until they actually finish the job, I'm not entirely sure how Israel maintains any kind of deterrence or credibility, frankly, in the region. The thing about the Arab world, about the broader Muslim world, is that the lingua franca, the common language there that the Arab world speaks, is brute strength. That it is a culture that knows strength and really strength alone. That is the only way to actually secure your place in this very volatile part of the world there. In this particular instance, especially given the announced war aim after October 7th, I really do think that Israel has to finish this job one way or the other.
Yeah, great point. Great point.
Josh, there are, I believe, 24 hostages who are believed to still be alive. And obviously, we are all very sympathetic to their situation and that of their family as well. But there are a lot of folks out there who are saying that this was far too risky. It endangered the lives of these hostages. But I spoke to Adi Alexander, the father of Eden Alexander, today. And even he said that this military action felt like it felt like the last resort, but the only resort. Do you agree?
I totally agree. In fact, I'll actually go even further. I was just saying a minute or so ago that Israel announced 2 war aims after October 7th. They announced that Hamas had to go, Hamas had to be eradicated, and the hostages have to come home. I've actually been personally critical of those 2 war aims because I do not think that those 2 war aims are actually on the same footing. And that's going to sound a little callous and heartless. And obviously, I do not have any loved ones there who have been rotting for a year and a half, ruled by the sickest, most satanic, diabolical jihadists on the planet. And I'm sure my stance would be a little different if I were. But just thinking soberly, objectively speaking there, it seems to me, from Israel's perspective, and really just from the United States perspective, from your perspective, just from anyone who has skin in the game, so to speak there, it seems to me like the destruction and eradication of Hamas is a clearly more important goal than retrieving the hostages. Again, I realize that sounds heartless. I realize it sounds callous, and I'm willing to take that criticism. But I'm just trying to think geostrategically here, militarily. It seems to me to be the clearly more important of the 2 things. So again, Israel had no choice. The other thing that I will mention, earlier, I was saying how Donald Trump has all but told Bibi to go back in. He's saying that the gates of hell will be opened here and all this very fiery rhetoric. Now, Donald Trump is someone who I think abhors weakness and respects strength. So if you are all but telling someone to go back in and finish the job, then you actually have to go in and finish a job, because the alternative then is to also look weak in the eyes of your staunchest ally and your greatest supporter, the United States.
Yeah, such an important dynamic. There's a fascinating conversation starting to go on in Congress and in some circles in American military, and that is it's time for the United States to end its military assistance, sort of assistance that we probably structured as second or third world assistance, and just treat Israel as a a military trading partner, a little bit different, so that there isn't, under Democratic presidents in the future, all the strictures they place on Israel in future military operations. Is that gaining any popularity inside Israel or in the United States? Do you see that possibly happening here?
John, I've actually personally been a huge proponent of what you just laid out for a long time now. I wrote my first article calling for this maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I have maybe 1,000 or 2,000 words in the book making this exact argument as well. It's in chapter 7, or chapter 7 or 8. I think it's chapter 7 if memory serves there. So I'm actually all in on this argument. I think that this continued $3 to $4 billion in annual aid from the U.S. to Israel actually undermines both countries. It undermines the United States because it's a decent amount of money, and frankly, it ends up being a slush fund going to crony capitalist endeavors, namely defense contractors like Boeing and Northrop Grumman. So it's not particularly great from an American perspective, especially given that we are cost conscious with an ever-splitting national debt and so forth there. And from Israel's perspective, to your point, I mean, when Democrats get in power, I remember all too well in Barack Obama's second term, John Kerry kind of threatening and saying, don't do this or don't do that. I mean, it was infamously much worse under Joe Biden and Antony Blinken as well there. So Israel, why would they want to put themselves in that position either? And frankly, the notion that the state of Israel could be so utterly reliant on any ally, including the United States, that it's going to take orders when it comes to how it conducts wars, that frankly undermines the entire raison d'etre. It undermines the entire purpose of the modern state of Israel, which is to be a place where Jews control their own homeland and Jews control their own sovereignty and indeed their own destiny in their ancestral homeland. So frankly, at kind of a more abstract theoretical level, I think that this current U.S.-Israel aid arrangement frankly undermines the entire notion of Zionism itself, actually. So I think that both countries would stand to benefit from phasing this out. I'm not saying that you cut off the spigot overnight. I'm not saying, frankly, that you do it in the middle of a very hot war. But over the mid to long term, I think it is very shrewd policy to phase this down.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are considering that as this moves forward. I think that the implication for Israel, if they are able to eradicate Hamas, are clear. For other nations that are in that general region, for Egypt, for Jordan, for other Middle Eastern countries who have felt the detrimental implications of having Hamas in that region, what does it look like for them post-Hamas?
So Hamas is just an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's an important thing to bear in mind here. Hamas was founded as the Palestinian Arab offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is largely bankrolled these days by two countries in particular. That would be Qatar and Turkey. Those are really the two countries above all that fund the Muslim Brotherhood, and those are the two countries who really have been mollycoddling and in many ways bankrolling and funding Hamas. Iran is kind of a unique case, obviously, but the Muslim Brotherhood really is part and parcel of Hamas. So it stands to reason that if Hamas were to go, the countries that are very cozy with the Muslim Brotherhood would take a pretty serious hit. So you would think logically that Turkey and Qatar's influence in the region might go down just a notch. Now Turkey also just happens to effectively orchestrate a coup against Bashar al-Assad in Syria. That was very much Turkish-backed, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So Turkey's on a bit of a high note there, but they would definitely take it down a notch if Hamas were to go there. It would be a tremendous victory just in general for a more moderate flavor of Islam if Hamas were to go, and if a more moderate form of Islam were to control that strip. I'm holding aside, I'm tabling for now the Donald Trump proposal that the United States actually takes over. I'm very open to being persuaded on that, by the way, but I'm kind of just being a little bit more pragmatic maybe and saying that if it is going to stay in some sort of Muslim hands there, it'll be a tremendous upgrade to get more moderate Arabs ruling there. The most logical way that would probably play out in my estimation would be you would get some sort of consortium of the more moderate Sunni Arab states, the Saudis, Bahrainis, Emiratis there. That could potentially look quite good as long as there are assurances that Hamas never comes back into power.
Yeah. Josh, I think we got to put a pin in this, but this is a great opportunity to send everybody to go check out your book, Israel and Civilization. Senior editor at large at Newsweek, Josh Hammer, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thank you guys very much.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, that's it for us tonight. That was so exciting to see those astronauts. Very good to see them home, and I'm sure that this was a great homecoming.